I want to know, talk about your casting process from beginning to end, because nobody really knew what The Amazing Race was. Survivor was on maybe for like a season, and they maybe had like a couple seasons of the challenge on MTV, but reality TV was really fresh then. So how did you figure out that The Amazing Race was casting, and kind of just take me through the entire casting process?
Okay, so my situation was a little bizarre. I'll take you back even before learning of The Amazing Race. So this would have been the summer of like around August or so of 2000. I was working at a law firm in New York, and I actually had a situation where I won't get into the details, but essentially my appendix ruptured. And so I had to take some time off of work. And I had been really just kind of stressed out with my job, and decided that after my whole appendix debacle, that I would actually just resign when I went back to work. So I went back to my job. I think it was like maybe like September of 2000, and I told my boss that I was resigning. And he was like, "What are you going to do?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'll just figure it out, but I just need to stop working the hours that I was working and just take a break." And so he asked me if I would stay on till the end of the year. Great law firm that I was at. He offered to cut back on my hours, so I could kind of take time to figure out what I wanted to do. He got me a career coach. And so as I started to come to work to kind of meet with the career coach and sort of research what I might want to do in the future, it sort of occurred to me that I needed an adventure of sorts, or something completely different. And at the time, I was a fan of Survivor, and I had been watching the show. And for some reason, I was like, "Oh, I'll just get on CBS's website and find out when Survivor is airing again, or when they're interviewing contestants." And I was looking for the application. So I got on CBS's website, and there was a little blurb in the corner. And at the time, it said that it was for a show called Race Around the World at the time, is what they were calling it. And so I clicked on it, read about it. It sounded like Survivor, except that you traveled. And so the idea of not staying in one spot was appealing to me. And so after researching, I pulled down the application, and I decided, this is what I wanted to do. So I actually wanted to do the show with one of my really close friends in law school, who actually was friends with Lenny. And so when I told Lenny about the show and how I was going to ask his friend Dwight to actually do it with me, he was like, "What, are you crazy? Like, I want to do it." And so I was like, okay. I wasn't too fond of that idea, but went with it, right? Because he was my boyfriend at the time. And so they gave us options for submitting your application. You could either submit it via a video, make a video and send it in, or they were having open call auditions on 59th Street, and there was a date and time that you could show up. So we tried in my living room, in my apartment, to make a video ourselves. And I just felt like every time we watched it back, it just didn't really convey our personalities and our relationship. And so I was like, why don't we just go? And I think we ended up going. I remember we were the second team in line. We got there at like 3 o'clock in the morning. For me, that's crazy because I live in Jersey, right? And so, but I worked in the city, so I went right from there to work. And just fate, as fate would have it, Bertram was the individual that actually interviewed us as part of the casting. So they had it set up in CBS studios where they were bringing people in, and it was rows of cameras that were set up, and there was somebody that was interviewing each person in the row in this room. And Bertram got us and just asked us questions, and I just had a good vibe with Bertram. And after he finished interviewing us, he asked us if we would stay nearby to actually be interviewed for the 5 o'clock news. So we did that. And then the process after that was really, Bertram wasn't involved for the most part. It was the casting company. And we just came back from multiple interviews in New York at various times where they asked us a slew of questions during each interview. And then at some point, we were then invited to California Um, and we were sequestered in a hotel. And there we went through a whole interview process. That was for a whole week that we were there, which included meeting with psychiatrists and taking IQ tests and more questions by the casting crew and different levels of people. I think it ended towards the end of the week with us interviewing with Les Moonves, who was the president of CBS at the time. And then shortly after getting back from California, if I recall correctly, we got a call saying that we had been selected to be on the show.
So yeah, that's great. You actually answered kind of my second question.
Okay.
Why did you pick Lenny as a teammate? So you answered two questions in one. So.
Yeah, no, it wasn't planned. The reason why I didn't automatically ask Lenny to do it was because he was kind of like, he had a lot going on at the time from a personal perspective, and I really wasn't sure that our relationship was going to work even then. And so, you know, that's really the reason why I didn't pick him. But when he obviously expressed an interest in wanting to do it, it was like, you can't not choose your boyfriend for his friend. And so I was like, okay, but you know, we saw how that turned out.
Yeah, other than maybe Paul and rest in peace, Nancy, after like the eighth leg, he seems like one of the most unenthusiastic people that wanted to like do it.
Which is weird, right? Because he kind of, like I said, the whole show, doing the show was my idea. And you know, it was my escape from my work and doing something completely different. And I asked him, and I'm very competitive, and so I was hoping that he would come with that energy. He had it at times, but it was really more about not about the race. Like there were times where we would be going places, and he would want to stop and like, you know, kind of take stock of his surroundings. And I was like, we can come back and do this at another time when we're not racing. Like, let's go, let's go. And so, yeah, the enthusiasm was not always there, but I expressed it and being frustrated with that. So.
Oh, you sure did. That was my favorite part of it. One of my favorite.
Yeah, I think, you know, the kudos to the editing team because I started to feel like, you know, just watching some of the episodes back, that things didn't happen in the order that they happened or how they presented it made it look a lot more dramatic than it actually was. And so that's TV.
So coming at the starting line, and you know, you have to go to South Africa. Was the show like what you expected, like going into it? Like, what did you expect the show to be? And then how did that kind of change maybe throughout like the first leg? Because you're at like Victoria Falls, and like I can't even imagine like what you're thinking. You're probably like, holy crap, this is like surreal. So kind of talk about
Well, I think before doing the show, you know, we had to sign contracts, right? And so and actually my parents had to sign them, my family members, anyone, people at work, actually my boss at work signed it. It was like anyone who we told about us being on the show was asked to sign it. And reading these contracts, if I recall correctly, I might even have mine still somewhere. It said that you could go from extremely hot to extremely cold conditions. Like they, you know, death was a possibility. Like everything you could possibly think that could go wrong was referenced in this contract, if I recall. And so I had no expectations. Like I just was completely clueless as to, scared but excited all at the same time, just from reading a contract that clearly indicated that I could be in danger at various times. And so you really don't, I guess in the moment, you really don't have time to kind of say this is surreal. It's just like, you just need to just move, you know, and opening that first clue in Central Park and seeing that you had to figure out how to get to South Africa. It's like immediate panic sets in, like, how do I do that? Like, which airport do I go to? It's just a matter of, and I think, I will say at various times, I probably did not appreciate the beauty and the fact that we were in certain locations Like you said, Victoria Falls. I remember it wasn't there wasn't an opportunity to really stop and take stock of, wow, this is such a beautiful, amazing place. It was, I need to get to the clue and find the flag. And so that was always the main focus. There were times when we had some downtime, like specifically in Africa, I recall, after we had checked in to Songwe Village, where Lenny and I were kind of like standing out. They had given us, they had these little alcohol beverages they had given us. We were standing out just looking at the beauty of it all, with these mountains and just the landscape, where you just actually got a moment to stop and just take stock of something amazing and having this opportunity. But then as soon as the cameras went back on and you were on the run, it was just, you just didn't stop, and you really didn't stop to think about it.
Yeah, that Victoria Falls one scared the crap out of me. Not even the bungee jumping; it's the bridge over where you get the clue. Because I have fear of bridges. So
Yeah, I actually fell and I cut my leg. And in hindsight, I remember where the clue was at, like where the box was at with the flag. There wasn't a gate or anything. And so we were always kind of like running, trying to push each other out of the way. And obviously, in looking back at it and putting my lawyer hat on, it was just like, that could have been catastrophic, right? If somebody had pushed somebody and they accidentally fell off there. So a little scary, but in the moment, like I said, you're really not thinking about it.
So talk to me, this actually an air on TV. It was the unaired roadblock where you had to cook an ostrich egg. I heard through the grapevine that some people didn't cook theirs all the way. They had to eat like this giant raw ostrich egg, which for people who don't know, I think the equivalent is like 12 to 14 chicken eggs.
I was told it was the equivalent of 2 dozen
Oh,
eggs.
oh God, that's even worse.
That's what I was told. So you actually had to make the fire yourself, and this was before you actually entered Songwe Village. This was a pit stop, and so you had to make the fire. And trying to get the fire going was really hard. So we crack open this egg, and it's in this little thing trying to cook, and it was just taking too long. And I'm not gonna lie, we just started to try to slurp it, and the gag reflex was there. Like I thought any moment I'm gonna throw up this egg. But yeah, I really just ate kind of this, like, didn't cook it all the way.
I'm shocked that they didn't air that because that's usually, I think that's
It
good
was
TV.
horrid.
Right? Like,
I would love to see the footage of it,
I didn't
just because I just even have the memories, and even just thinking about it makes me want to but barf. But yeah, it was gross. But we did not cook the whole thing, and that was one I think we were able to do together. So it wasn't just one of us trying to eat it; we both were.
oh, well, that's nice. Talk about bungee jumping. That looked actually like really scary and really fun. Like, what was your like thought? Were you just like, I'm gonna do this, or were you nervous, or?
So it's very, so you had the cabling, you had to go across the ravine first,
Yeah.
right? And so thought that was it. Like, got to the other side, like, whoo, we're done. And it's like, no, you need to now step over there. And I was like, what? And so I think Lenny went before me, because I remember he was down and he was like yelling up at me while I was going. And I was like, just be quiet, because once you get over the fear of doing it, it's really beautiful. Like, so they hooked me up in all of the gear, and I'm just like, are you guys sure this is safe? And they're like, yes, they are, what have you. And so they're like, Karyn, I remember the guy who was leading it was like, Karyn, we're going to count to 3, and then you're going to jump on 3. And so, and you have to walk out onto a plank, and you're just standing out there, which, me walking out there, that was hard enough, right? And so I'm standing there, and when he got to 3, I didn't jump. And I was like, can't you just push me off? Like, the idea of just stepping off myself was not to my death, so to speak, was not something I really wanted to do. But so he was like, Karyn, you're still there. Like, you were supposed to jump. And so it was like, we ended up doing it again, and I ended up finally just jumping. And you're just falling until you're not falling anymore. And so I think at some point I did open my eyes and actually watch the whole thing. But I really like the swing. At some point, you're just like swinging back and forth once you do the bungee as they're lowering you.
Yeah.
And it was just like so serene. It was beautiful up there. You see all the trees and everything. And it was just so peaceful. And Lenny was down on the ground. And I'm like, Karyn, I'm like, shut up. Like, I'm trying to enjoy this, like by myself, just give me a moment of peace and quiet. But it was beautiful and I enjoyed it. I actually want to go skydiving. It's on my to-do list. I was supposed to do it with my brother, but he did it without me. But that is on my list of things to do. I enjoyed that experience. I'd do it again.
You get fourth place, your best finish. Where did kind of the breaking point stem between you and Lenny? Because you obviously getting the flight to Paris is like really stressful, because unlike like now where they travel, I think like maybe they'll stay in the same place for a leg, or they won't travel too far. You had to travel like 3,500 miles, and then you had to do the roadblock and stuff like that. So where did kind of the breaking point start? Because you did really well that first leg, but then was it the Eiffel Tower or?
I probably would say things started with the Eiffel Tower. Yeah, that was so the background of this too is that Lenny had never traveled before, and I had definitely been to Paris a few times. And so in hindsight, this is the thing about the race, right? You have to take the good with the bad when you're selecting one of the teammates to do one of the challenges. They can only do it from beginning to end. And so you have to play up, pick someone who has the strengths in the area, right? Unfortunately, Lenny and I were divided in that instance, in that I knew Paris really well and knew where all of the monuments were. And he'd never traveled before, but he was definitely more athletic than I was. And so running up the steps for the Eiffel Tower, we thought he'd be faster at getting that done. And so that's where we had two different skills that needed to actually belong to one individual to be able to get it done quickly. And so I think that's where the frustration, I started to experience frustration, number one, because he came down from the Eiffel Tower for no other reason than to tell me that he couldn't find the clue and didn't have money to put in the viewfinder, a franc to put in the viewfinder, which I couldn't help him with. So why come down to tell me that? Mm-hmm. And then the other part of it was that when he led us to Notre Dame, he actually based it off of where the direction that a viewfinder was pointing in, where he didn't stop to think that maybe another team may have purposely pointed it in that direction to lead us off course. So those two things, which I did not discover, the last one of which I didn't discover until we got to Notre Dame. And after we went through it, and which in hindsight, I'm glad I did. Well, we actually ended up needed to go back there anyway, but given everything that's happened to it since, to actually have had the opportunity to be inside, which I had done on occasions before the fire that occurred. So to get there and sort of be like, Lenny, what did you see that led you here? And that's when TV sort of comes to play, because how it got read to me by my friends is, you made Lenny cry. And I absolutely did not make him cry. Literally, it started to rain. They caught the rain fall onto his head and scroll down his eye. And in that moment, it looked like, he was crying because I was yelling at him, and I wasn't even yelling. I just told him I was disappointed and asked him what it was that he saw. But that came across as bad Karyn and poor Lenny.
Well, I think it's also ridiculous because, like, even if you quote unquote did make him cry, like, I'm sorry, like, they didn't even air the fact that, like, they aired the fact that he was like, oh, this is in Notre Dame or whatever, but they really didn't air the fact that, like, he didn't even know where he was going first. And so you're frustrated, you're racing. Do you know, like, how far off like Kim and Leslie were, because based off the edit, it seemed like the only reason why you actually survived was because they were arguing with a taxi driver. But I'm not sure if they were actually like really close to you or.
They were actually. What I did was we saw them, but I actually stopped the traffic in the circle and ushered our camera crew and everybody across. So have you ever been to Paris? They have the underground tunnels, so you're not supposed to cross the circle. You're supposed to go underground to come up on the other side. That brings you right in the middle. I didn't do that. I didn't want to risk the time it would take to go underground and come back up on the other side. So I just stopped the traffic.
But yeah. So where was I? So So how close were they to you? Because I saw them like arguing in the taxis and stuff, and it looked like.
Yeah, no, they were very close. So when we got back, because we had to go back to the Eiffel Tower, and Lenny had to go back up the stairs again. And so when he went back up, by then Leslie and Kim were there, Nancy and
Emily.
her daughter were there, Emily. So the last of everybody was there, and so they all just worked together to find the flag. So then they all came running down together. So it was just literally who got there first, getting to a taxi and getting to the Arc de Triomphe.
Yeah, that must have been like really nerve-wracking. So then we move on to the third leg, and you have the distinct pleasure of going through a sewer. So how wonderful was that?
It wasn't as bad as people was. First of all, after our Eiffel Tower situation, I wasn't willing to let Lenny do anything else. So some of my friends were like, why would you not let him go down in the sewer? And I was like, did you not see the Eiffel Tower? So I went down, and not that I frequent sewers, but it was probably one of the cleanest sewers that cleaner than I would have expected it to be, basically. I think if I recall, because I haven't watched the show, forever, but they showed on screen maybe like a rat or two or something like that, if I recall. I never saw anything. There were spotlights in different places, obviously, for the cameras. So I felt very comfortable being down there and just navigating my way to where I needed to be and what I needed to get and get out.
Can you just, that's great. Can you just talk about what I found so interesting watching season one compared to other seasons is, I guess you would call it the lack of urgency when you were like bunched up with a bunch of teams getting to the pit stop and people were just like passing you and you weren't sprinting to the mat. Like in terms of like, at least that third leg, you had you, Paul, and Amy, and then Nancy and Emily, and then you had Nancy, and she was like, I think we should just all hold hands, and you were like in the back of the pack, and then like in Tunisia, when you were riding that camel, like Letty wasn't moving, and Frank and Margarita passed you, and like, what was that like with the lack of urgency? Because I didn't really understand that. Like, why are these people sprinting? Like, did they know what positions they were in?
Well, I think I'm just trying to recall, because like I said, I haven't watched the show in a while, our season. If I recall, so you're released from a pit stop based on when you arrive. And we didn't have the benefit that, mind you, we're the first show. We didn't have any sponsors or anything. Like they started to have, once you got to a certain location, you won something, a trip somewhere, or things like that. So we didn't have any of that. And so there wasn't a sense of urgency. So the idea of somebody actually getting ahead of you, if it's 2 minutes, 5 minutes, it's a very short period. You're getting released from the pit stop right at the same time they are. Like the ability for them to really do anything and get too far ahead of you is just not there. And I think the reason why we all crossed together is we actually kind of bonded. Uh, Bill, Team Guido was not a contested favorite throughout the process. And most, I kind of, if I could describe them, it would be dastardly. They actually, I admired them and I didn't like them all at the same time, in the sense that they were always so polished. I don't know, it was like Inspector Gadget with their bags. Like they would pull their clothes out of the bag, and for some reason they would look like pressed, and they were very color coordinated, and just they spoke, one of them spoke French. So they did great throughout France. But they were, you know, skilled travelers, so to speak. And so, and they also didn't play fair. Like they weren't trying to make friends throughout this process.
Yeah.
And I think the group of us in France, we all just kind of like bonded during the train situation, and kind of like became friends. And so I think those were the start of a friendship that kind of continued through it, through the race. And so we just felt in the moment, I mean, it really wasn't going to make a difference. We had traveled on the train together, and we would have been leaving just shortly, within, you know, minutes of each other, even if we let one person cross before the other. So we just decided to all do it together.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there really wasn't so it was in the beginning, it was everybody's running to get to things. And we slowly started to figure out that even if you were one of the first people to arrive somewhere, and then you were released before everyone else, that didn't guarantee you anything, because they found ways to slow things down because a store didn't open. And then there was a pileup where everybody else who was released from the pit stop would ultimately catch up to that person. And so we slowly started to realize that that was happening with some degree of consistency, that necessarily rushing, I mean, obviously we would have known we would have gotten, you know, prizes or something for arriving. I think people would have been more conscious, but we just didn't focus on it at some point. It just didn't become a priority.
Yeah, I was just wondering in terms of you guys, because you finished near the back of the pack. So I'm like, did you have any idea that you were close? Like, did you know that there was like a team behind you? Because I'm like, you finished like 6 out of 8 and
Which leg are you
so,
talking about?
like Paris and Tunisia, like when you were like in the bottom, like when Pat and Brenda were eliminated, and then Paul and Amy, like there were a couple teams that passed you, and I'm like, did you know that you were behind them? Because like you finished like near the back of the pack, so I guess like in your sense, like you could have been eliminated. So like that's where I was kind of going in terms of like the sense of urgency, because other than
Okay, I
friends,
can tell you, I don't mean to interrupt you. I can tell you, and again, I'm trying to piece it together. I really should go back and watch it again. But I do recall, like, the Sahara Desert situation. We learned while we were running, while we were racing, that Paul and Amy were missing.
oh
So we knew something was wrong. And they had sent helicopters or whatever out to try to find them. They were missing for a while. I don't know where they ended up. So we knew we weren't going to be last, that they would have been last, if that makes sense.
yeah, that makes sense.
And then we were actually, if I recall correctly, we were supposed to stay in the desert overnight, but there was some kind of storm brewing, and they had to evacuate us, and we actually went and stayed in a hotel.
Yeah, that's what they said on the episode. Yeah, I was just wondering that because
Yeah, so we knew Paul and Amy were missing.
that's
And so there was no way that we were going to be last.
okay. So after the third leg, you go on to Tunisia, and I don't know if you can really visit there anymore. I've heard because of 9/11, you can't really do the things that you're able to do there now. That was actually
I was glad to get to the Star Wars thing. That was
yeah,
really
that
cool.
was one of that and the what do you call it? The maze roadblock where you had to like
Uh-huh.
keep the torch. That was one of my favorites. Like I don't know how well I would do at that, but just kind of talk about your leg in Tunisia. Obviously, like Lenny did the roadblock, but what was kind of your struggles there? Because you, if it wasn't for David Margareta's screw up with the what do you call it, the whatever Turkish currency is, you might have been last because they were in the middle of the pack, I think, and then they just slipped to the bottom because of currency issues.
Yeah, I don't remember. There were a couple of legs for us where I felt that, but for it probably started with Paris, but for the actions of other people, Lenny and I would have been out. I mean, he actually, if I recall correctly, he took a while with the torch thing. And I believe, I don't know who I was sitting. I remember sitting there with someone, and I don't remember who, but I remember Emily. Emily did the torch between her and her mom, right? I
Yeah,
think she was the one
she
who
was
did
like
that
third.
roadblock. And I think she finished before Lenny did.
She finished way before everyone. I think that was their best leg when they like basically were tied for second with Kevin and Drew because they just followed each other.
Yeah, that was Kevin and Drew definitely looked out for Nancy and Emily for a while, and I attribute their actions to actually keeping them around for longer than they likely would have. But I really don't even remember um, that particular episode aside. So the currency issue that you're talking about, I really don't remember what happened there.
All
I'd
I
have to
know,
go
well,
back
they
and
had
look.
American dollars and they had to exchange it for like Turkish money, and then the bank was closed, and so they had to spend like 40 minutes getting like new money, and then you were able to like beat them in the torch because Dave or whatever went the complete opposite direction of where you're supposed to go, and then you
Yeah.
finished. But was there any like fun moments you had like in Tunisia? Because one of my favorite detours, which I wish they would bring back, which you guys didn't do, was the massages. I would be good at that, just sitting on my butt and getting a massage. So
Yeah, I mean, there Tanisha doesn't seem like really memorable to me. I don't know why. Aside from the torch situation, I just always thought when, and I can't say I failed as well in India, but I always just felt like I couldn't understand why it took Lenny just longer than everybody else to do something. And so that was very frustrating. I know people got sick of hearing me because at some point I think he was yelling out while he was down there. And I was yelling back and everybody. So I always hear, like, even to this day, like one of my coworkers actually during the pandemic started watching it, and he like sends me emails, like, where he's like yelling, Lenny, you're not going to treat me like Lenny, at work. So that's all I remember is yelling to him, like, while he was going through that, to just, try to encourage him to get through it. But yeah, that was a close one. Yeah,
I'm
that's right. It was Dave and Margarita with us at the end. But other than that, I don't remember I can say I remember the whole currency issue.
I'm just glad you all figured out that it was Tunisia and not Turkey, because with my bad luck, I probably would be sailing to Turkey instead of Tunisia. So I'm
Yeah,
glad.
but we all got on a ship together. Like, it was a
Yeah,
coordinated arrival. We were all sitting there waiting before it took off, the ship took off. So it was, you know, we knew we were in the right place.
because I was
You
watching the
would you
episode,
would have been fine.
I was watching the episode, and Phil was like, "Oh, they have to figure out like what country this is." I'm like, "Well, what if somebody picks the wrong country? What is the camera crew gonna do?"
Yeah, no, it seems like we're not seeing each other, and there's a disconnect, but there isn't. Um, we regularly, saw all the players, and it's weird. Like, even going back to Songwe Village, for example, we got released in the middle of the night. And so we were constantly driving past, like, that was just total chaos. Trying to find a clue in Africa in the middle of the night was just impossible. But we kept passing each other. So, there were times I'm trying to figure out where we were. We were on some road, and Lenny and I ran into Robin Brennan, who had been released long before us, but they were still looking for the clue as well. And so we're really not, it seems like everybody's far apart, and there's a disconnect between us in the legs, but we see each other periodically, not always, but
Yeah, I think they
like
should bring that
driving
back.
around in circles.
The when they had the clue when it was only like 100 yards away, and it was like not in an obvious location, but it was so close, but nobody could figure that out. I think it'd be fun
Yeah.
if they brought that
Yeah,
back.
no, that was perfect that we got released at night, because clearly if it had been during the day at the village, we could have knocked on people's, doors and asked them, which I think maybe somebody tried to do, but it was the middle of the night, so you're waking people up. But the place where we needed to go was right there on the village property, and no one knew it. Everybody just immediately got in their cars and left. So
Yeah, so after the Tunisia leg, there wasn't. I feel like the fifth leg, other than the what do you call it, the walkie-talkie ones, wasn't too memorable because it seems like you guys were just driving a bunch because you were in the desert, really.
yeah.
How bad was the camel ride fun, or how bad was that? Or were you like,
Well, I rode on the camel. The camels are covered with bugs, like flies and stuff. And Lenny and I were arguing. And so the camel was spitting on him. And so I love that. I thought he was not happy. But that was sort of my comic relief for the situation. But it wasn't bad. I liked it. And I'm a big fan of the TV show movie, The Mummy, when the lead actress is like riding on the camel, and she's like, she has this little thing, and she's like, T, 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 T. So I was doing that, and he was like getting annoyed with me, and the camel was spinning on him. And so it was a beautiful thing.
yeah, so you get past the fifth leg, you survive, and then you go to Rome, and this was one of probably the most painful travel experiences, I think, other than the whole Paris trip, with like booking flights. And talk about how frustrating it was, like with Lenny, when you're trying to take initiative, you're trying to book this flight, and he's
Oh,
the
you're talking
driver.
about the flight from Tunisia to
Yeah,
Rome?
Tunisia, and you're like busting your butt. You get your team in the lead, and you're having this guy who's like, I don't care, let's just wait it out. And you're like, no, I'm going to take initiative. Like, screw the Guidos, like, screw everybody else. And it worked. Talk about how frustrating it was to kind of deal with that in that situation when he was checked out.
Well, I actually didn't get the full gist of him being checked out until I actually saw it on TV, right? Because they show him talking to the camera saying she's spinning her wheels or wasting time. But when we arrived at the airport and everybody got there, it was just total chaos. Apparently, there was an airstrike in play, so no planes were taking off. And so everyone was trying to see if they could find other ways, including some teams like, I think, Robin Brennan and Team Guido and Frank and Margarita, given the fact that those were the three that were pretty much always in the lead. We're looking into even, I think, pooling their money together to see if they could get a private plane to take them to Rome, because we had no clue when this airstrike was going to end. And so I managed to track down the gentleman that actually ran the airport. And I think at one point I was sitting in his office, and obviously folks are mesmerized by being on when they see a camera's following you. And so I asked Lenny to sit, just take the bags and let me try to figure out, what was going on. And so this guy was really, really nice, and explained to me that these airstrikes happen all the time, and that I just needed to just be patient. It would get lifted, and we would get a direct flight to Rome. And, I explained I was just like, are you absolutely certain? Because as you saw, everybody else started to, once some of the airstrikes were lifted, started to actually get connecting flights
Yeah.
to get to Rome. But he assured me, he was like, Karyn, I absolutely promise you that we will get you on a direct flight. And he actually, I think he or someone on his staff walked us to the plane when the airstrike was actually lifted. And so, after I talked to this gentleman, I went back to Lenny and I said, listen, I met with this guy. This is what he says. Are you willing to just risk it? We can risk it and just wait for a direct flight because he says the airstrike will get lifted, or we can try to get on a connecting flight. Understanding that if it doesn't happen, we will be eliminated from the show. Like, are you comfortable with that? I was like, I'm willing to take the risk sort of if you are. And he was. He came back and he told me that, he responded that he was fine with us waiting. And sure enough, after everybody left and we were left in the airport by ourselves, the airstrike lifted. And that's when we were walked to the plane. So I didn't know until I saw the actual show air that that's what he said. And that was his thoughts.
Yeah.
So that was disappointing to watch, but it is what it is.
I wonder what production would have done, just because I think I was watching it and like Joe and Bill and I think it was like Frank and Margarita were talking, and they were like, oh, there's no flights to get to Rome, and like the next flight I think it was like the 20th of some month, and they were like, oh, the next flight's the 28th. So I don't know what production would have done with that whole 8-day
I
strike
have
or whatever you
I have
call it,
no
because they
clue
must have been
either.
in shambles.
Yeah, a lot. I don't know how organized they ultimately became, but there were times when unintentionally they were on flights with us, and then rushing to sort of get local crews on the ground to be able to cover just because of how things were progressing. So
Yeah. So, how frustrating was it when you're in Rome, or when you're in what do you call it, Rome, and you're in first place, and other than maybe the Guidos, who I think were like 20 minutes behind you, were like you had a sizable lead over pretty much everybody, and then the store opens, and you're like, finally we have a break, we're in the top of the pack again for the first time since the first leg. So how frustrating was it to have that lead, and then you have the or you have to find the statue or whatever, but that doesn't open until the morning.
so to just back up a little bit, I guess we arrived in Italy first, right? And we went to get our clue when we arrived, because I remember us getting the clue at night. And I will share with you, 'cause I've had this conversation in the past, and I don't think I've shared this with anyone yet. But so we had a discussion right then and there as to whether we should use the fast forward, which would have taken us to the Coliseum to get further ahead.
Yeah.
And we ultimately decided not to use it because of the fact that we were already in first place. And, as what we had seen thus far is the fast forward hadn't really helped anybody who had used it. And we figured you only get to use it once, so we may as well wait. So we ended up walking around Rome for a while before we ultimately spent money on a hotel, just because we would have had to otherwise sleep out on the street. And then we went to show up at, I think, the statue. And I want to say on our way there, we weren't the first people there.
Yeah,
If
you
I
weren't. I
recall.
was shocked about that. I'm like, why didn't they just like go
So
early?
so here's what happened. Our camera crew had an issue, and I was pissed about it and had vocally expressed my concerns to production. They had an issue where they needed another tape for filming. And when that happens, they just stop and we can't go anywhere. So my issue was, why are you just figuring this out now? we spent the night in Rome. Like you could have taken care of all of that during the evening as opposed to when we're racing. And so I think it ultimately got us behind. And I believe at the end of the leg, after complaining, we got some kind of credit for it.
Yeah, I think you might have got like 30 minutes, but was that the only time credit? Because that was my question that I was going to ask. Like, because I know you missed the train,
Right.
and then that gave Nancy and Emily a chance to get ahead and like the other teams. Uh, but was that the main production interference or whatever you call it, or the delay, or was there like another one too?
No, that was one because they had to wait for a car or somebody to come to actually bring them additional tape. So we were stuck there and couldn't do anything about it.
Talk about the roadblock, because I mean, even though you were just driving to have a direction, you had a guide that took you there. It seemed like you had like the most fun, like you were jumping out afterwards. You were like,
Oh,
really
I gave the guy a hug.
yeah, not even him, but like even when you got to the pit stop, you like hugged Lenny, and I was like, whoa, with all the arguments that they were doing, like I guess she was just like really excited.
I would say during the show, it's an emotional roller coaster. I'd like to think if I had somebody who was really competitive that I didn't like, that we still could actually do the show together and have a good time.
Yeah.
And so the Italian guy that helped me was so sweet. And, and Italy is just, I had been before, one of my favorite places to visit. And so just being in Italy kind of puts me in a different mood. And so to find somebody that was willing to take time out of their day to actually drive, have me follow them to where I needed to go without me having to worry about navigating was such a sweet thing. And it just put me in a good mood. And I think we had already learned at some point we were going to get credit because I was really pissed about the fact that we had that delay.
Yeah.
And we were still in the race. So
did you know that it was gonna be a non-elim, like going into it, or did they?
But there was going to be, I'm sorry?
A non-elim, like non-elimination. Did you know there was
No,
gonna be a non-elim leg?
no,
Well,
I
that
don't think
must have been
I don't think so.
exciting.
So there you go. That's even something to be more excited about. So
So
I was like, I travel a lot, and one thing I never do when I travel is rent cars. We had I had in preparation for the Amazing Race, they had told us initially that somebody was going to have to drive a stick shift, and neither Lenny or I knew how to drive. So I actually spent my time before the race started I actually took lessons on how to drive a stick. So I was grateful when they ultimately ended up providing us with drivers, and I did not have to do that because that would have been a nightmare. But I felt like I had a little bit of so the idea of being able to drive a regular car in Italy was also kind of fun for me, and I enjoyed it.
oh, that was a regular car. I thought it was a smart car.
I mean, a regular car in the sense that it wasn't a stick
Oh,
shift.
oh, I'm like,
Yeah, it wasn't a stick
yeah,
shift. So yeah,
because
if it had been a stick shift, I probably would have had a completely different.
there have been I've seen plenty of teams get eliminated based on the fact that they cannot drive stick shifts. So I eventually want to go on the Amazing Race, and my partner's like we have like the same personality, but we're like exact opposite in terms of like things that we're good at. So he's like a 6'5", like 240 baseball player, and I'm like a skinny, like I can do like all the climbing, all the height stuff, all like the eating the gross things, and anything physical. I'm like, that's your job. I ain't lifting a finger. You will carry me across the line if I have to go.
You just better hope, like I said, there's not a combination of the two of those things. Like if he has to eat something nasty and
Yeah.
drive the stick shift, like that's you just never know.
Yeah, so after that leg, it's unfortunately your swan song in the India leg. Now, preference, I have never been to India based off watching every single leg that is in India, other than a racist, bigoted, or homophobic, or any of those countries that are like that. India is the one place I do not want to go. So how
Really?
bad was India? Because it looked like a nightmare in terms of navigating.
Well, it's funny. I had actually, India wasn't on my place of my list of places that I wanted to visit. Ultimately, we ended up landing there, obviously, as you saw in the race. It was very chaotic, confusing. Just the smells and everything were just overwhelming. And I'll circle back to the details. So we had that experience, and obviously, it ends for us there. But I I had the opportunity while I was there. I was asked if we wanted to go see the Taj Mahal, and I guess I was really kind of disappointed, angry, upset, frustrated in the moment that I declined and elected to stay in my hotel room once we got eliminated and didn't do that. And I had some regret afterwards, but it was like, when am I ever going to go back to India? So, and my brother is works in finance, and he actually his company has offices there. And I think around 2015, he went over by himself for a month to work over there. And so he had met some friends and coworkers with coworkers that are based there. And then in 2017, my cousin was going to India and asked me if I wanted to go. And I was just like, I really need to, like, I never want my last experience to be a negative one anywhere. And believe it or not, I need to get back there because it's been too long. I'll speak on that in a minute, which is Paris. But so I didn't want my last experience there to be a negative one. I didn't see the Taj Mahal. All I had was this bad memory of what happened on The Amazing Race. So needless to say, I went back and I took my brother with me. And we spent we went to Delhi, Agra, and Jaipur. And it was just an amazing trip. I loved it. I actually met a tourist guide there who has his own company. And so we even keep in touch to this day where, he's waiting for me to I plan to go back again. And I actually have since started learning Hindi. And so I had a Punjabi tutor here. When I came back from India, I started taking classes. So, and we have an Indian population at work. And so I sort of communicate with them in Hindi a little bit. I mean, I can say, how are you? And things like that. And, Meti Kun, which is I'm fine. So I want to be able to actually go back to India more frequently in the future. But okay, so that being said, so it's really not that bad. You say it's not someplace you wouldn't want to go. All I'm saying is
On the
there are
Amazing
some,
Race, on the Amazing Race, as far as like,
yeah, no, but there are some amazing places in India, and I would highly encourage people to, let their guard down and visit. It's beautiful, and the people are great, and I've enjoyed my visit there. So so arriving in India, really crazy. We went to, what was it, Red Fort,
Red Fort or Red Drum or
and I actually this was like a sore spot with me. Like I got lucky, and I just did not take full advantage of my luck. I made eye contact with someone who had a rickshaw. Actually, it was more like riding on a horse-drawn carriage. And I got on his contraption, and I told him where I needed to go. He was like, I know exactly where it is. The other contestants were going in a completely different direction. He assured me he knew a shortcut to get there a lot faster. And I was like, I'm going to roll with it. And he led me right there before anybody else did. It was crowded. It was overwhelming. I walked up to this little station and asked for the clue, and it was given to me. And I literally just snatched it out the box and got back on. And I did not take the whole box. And had I done so, I would have known that I needed to go to the Taj Mahal, or that the hotel I needed to go to was near the Taj Mahal. I did not do that. I got back in the carriage and he got me back to where Lenny was even faster than it took for us to get there, in record time before everyone else. And we hopped in a taxi, and I asked the taxi driver to take us to this hotel, and he didn't know where it was. And that was where things kind of went down from there.
You should have hired the rickshaw driver to drive the taxi then, because he was killing it for you, because you smoked them. Like, I think
Yeah, it was record
like
time.
15, I think like Bill and Joe were ahead of you before you started the roadblock. You were, I think, I don't know where you were, but you finished like 15 minutes before like the second place team.
He went a completely different route than everybody else, and he got us right there, got me right there.
So talk about how bad the taxi driver was. I guess this was your iconic moment, other than you screaming, Lenny, Lenny in Paris, the whole you lied to me. What was that like? Because I heard that you had to not only, you didn't know where you were going, but you had to go in multiple taxis or whatever.
Yeah. So the taxi driver did not, and obviously we don't have cell phones, you can't Google anything. The taxi driver did not know where the hotel was, right? So what we did, I don't know, this was probably my decision only because I travel, and I doubt Lenny would have suggested it, was we ended up actually stopping at hotels in the area to speak to someone in concierge, to get, and I actually was kind of upset. So Lenny took on this task, right, of going into the hotel with, I think the camera crew might have followed him, to try to find out where the hotel was, and no one seemed to know. And then we also learned that the taxis can only go but so far, because there's various districts where they'd have to stop and let you out, or take you to another taxi station. And then you have to get on another taxi to get to your destination. So there wasn't a taxi that could take us straight to the Taj Mahal. And I have more of an appreciation for that now, because having just been in India 3 years ago, we actually rented I had a private driver who drove us all the way from Delhi to Jaipur to Agra, and it is not a short drive. So it's like a taxi driver driving from New Jersey to Delaware. It's a long drive. And so yeah, I don't think I really appreciated the distance or really understood the distance in the moment as a contestant. But as a tourist visiting, I now do. And so the issue became, and unfortunately, I'm just more of an extrovert and more of an in-your-face kind of, I don't know whether it's just my personality or just me also being a lawyer. But in terms of kind of negotiating, like Lenny just didn't seem like he cared to do it or was up to the task. So it became me actually. And, as you saw, I think at one point, Nancy and Emily had some issues just as being women trying to hide their.
That's why I did not. That's why the whole India thing turned me off, because in the following leg, like they couldn't even get train tickets because they were like really sexist, and like in terms of like, I'm sure it's probably changed now, but in terms of like that whole situation, it really turned me off.
Right. Yeah, I think there still is some kind of expectation that the man will take the lead in terms of discussions. It's weird because I went to India with my brother, and I think people thought he was my husband. We both had the same last name. And so he's my younger brother. Oh. And even then, traveling with him through India, I was the one that was kind of like paying for things and sort of saying, this is what I want, or this is where I need to go. And so there still is that sort of like, confusion as to why you're doing it and the man's not doing it. So I'd say there's still some of that there, even to this day. But that being said, I did, when we had discussions about money, I think at some point maybe I had money in my hand. And I think one of the guys was like, telling me how much it was going to cost. And I was like, are you crazy? Like, I'm not paying that much. Like, that's ridiculous. I don't even remember what it was, but we kind of got into a dispute about what we were willing to pay. And so obviously all of that took time. And unfortunately, it ultimately ended up into a race of the rickshaws, or I think we were just in regular cars, but to get to the pit stop, and that was between Nancy and Emily. And I want to say, I think we were told that there was something like 5 minutes between us. Like it wasn't.
We're shocked that they finished in fifth. Like
it wasn't a big difference between us. And I think I remember even when we got closer to the hotel, it was at night, and trying to figure out, they don't have street lights. So trying to figure out which direction or driveway, would lead up and all that stuff. That's where the time got wasted, but it was extremely close.
How frustrating was it? Because you talked about the fast forward. In terms of like Frank and Margarita, it actually helped them for multiple legs, because I think it was the first time in Amazing Race history that a team finished a leg that another team like wasn't done. They basically laughed Nancy and Emily, so they were departing for the next leg when y'all finished, or it was the following. I'm not really sure. So how frustrating was it, like in terms of like, crap, if you would have just made it one more leg, you probably, depending on the situation, because I think only like, if they had been eliminated, only you and Joe and Bill would have had fast forwards, and you probably would have put yourself in a good position.
I think after India, after that experience, it was it was really, I don't even think I was thinking about anything after that, because of the fact that, so at some point, even before we act, which is why I was frustrated already when I got out of the car in India, was that it's kind of hard to be frustrated with anything else when I was just really frustrated with Lenny. Like our discussion, like he had basically given up. Like even as we were trying to find a concierge that could help us get to the hotel, like he was having discussions with the camera crew and the sound crew in the car around, this is over for us, and they were just laughing and joking about it, like it was, we're done, like there wasn't even any hope. And so that was frustrating. So it's kind of hard to think about anything else. I think we had our own internal battles going constantly, that was more of the focus throughout the race than it was kind of like anything anyone else was doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so just a couple more questions. Did you have to be actually sequestered in India? Because I know, I think it was Patricia, she was like, we had to be sequestered in Paris for the rest of the race. So did you have to be sequestered, or what happened?
After, I don't know where I was to this day, I can't even tell you. After we were eliminated, they drove us to the most amazing hotel I've ever stayed at, like a 5-star hotel. I requested to be able to have a different room than Lenny, so we weren't even together. I think I had like my own little butler who like delivered my meals and stuff. And we were literally there, I want to say, for maybe a full day. We then took a flight from India to Paris. And so we saw Leslie and Kim and Patricia, like everybody else who had been eliminated was all sequestered.
All sequestered them in Paris? I thought
Yes.
they sequestered them in like the city that they were eliminated.
No, we all flew back to Paris. That we had sort of a den mother, her name is Sammy, and she had responsibility for us. She dished out our stipends during the day, and sort of made sure that, health-wise, if we needed anything, because I know I had some health issues after I got back to Paris that she kind of went out and got medicine for me and stuff. And so, yeah, we were all sequestered in the same hotel. We ate dinner together. We like ventured out in Paris together. They also gave us the opportunity to travel as long as we were back. I think the most we could be gone for was 3 days. And so I parted ways with Lenny and I went with, who did I go with? I went to Prague with Amy. And then we caught up with Leslie and Kim, who were actually there as well. So folks traveled. You could go for up to 3 days at a time, but you had to come back. You had to fly back to Paris. And then we hung out in the city together. So we really got a chance to, I would say the folks who were eliminated from Lenny and I on, like Matt and Anna, like we spent every day together doing something and in Paris. Like we went to shows and or out to dinner. Yeah, so we kind of got to know each other really well, unlike the other teams that were still traveling.
Yeah, so just a couple more questions.
And then so just you know, after we got close to it being the end of the race, right, where we're going back to Queens, they flew us all back to New York together and put us up in a hotel there. And so that we could be at the finish line, which that kind of got a little awkward because we were actually on the subway. And with it kind of messed up the whole Frank and Margarita situation. And there's some things that happened there, but they should have won that.
They should have, because I listened to an interview with like Robin Brennan, and they were like, I think they didn't Frank and Margarita like miss a flight or something, or like no, it was like their directions. It was like because Frank lived there, and this Robin Brennan were like, just take as fast as you can, and Frank and Margarita gave them like complicated directions, but I guess the whole subway scandal.
Yeah, there was a subway issue that was, I think they protested what happened there, but
yeah.
It was what it was. So
yeah.
That's what happens, you know, kind of like life intervenes, and that's the reality of it.
So just a couple more questions. Well, would you do the race again?
I would definitely with a better a better companion. But I absolutely would do it again. I really enjoyed it. It was notwithstanding the whole issues that Lenny and I had. I enjoy traveling and just interacting with different people. I can say I don't know that I would have survived the rat temple.
That scared me. It's like, oh God, can they like bite you? Can you get
yes,
sort of, like,
I don't know that I could have done that. So it may have been just divine intervention that we got eliminated when we did, because I don't know who would have done that. I don't know that Lenny would have wanted to do it, and I certainly wouldn't have been a fan.
That and the tiger one that they do in Thailand, nope, not doing that. Absolutely not. They had that, and then they had one roadblock in another season where you were like in a cage and you had to feed an alligator. Not doing that either.
Yeah.
But so who do you keep in contact with anybody from the race? And if you could pick, I'm not sure if you still watch it, but if you could pick any partner from any season, or even like your family member, who would you pick and why?
I am very close to Leslie, and we still keep in touch to this day. I consider her one of my best friends. We actually, after the show, connected. She came to New Jersey and stayed with me. We went to Costa Rica during the summer and lived together with a family while we took Spanish classes and traveled on the weekends. So I would say my friendship with Leslie is one of the best things to come out of The Amazing Race.
That's awesome. You don't really see that too much anymore.
What's that?
I said you don't really see like too many people bonding, because as far as like, I don't know what it was like back then, but in terms of like you were talking about travel and stuff, apparently now they just, my friend was on it and she was like, yeah, we just had to stay in Greece for like 3 weeks and we were able to do nothing and it was miserable and all I did was eat chips and watch TV.
Yeah, no, we actually got out.
Yeah,
That's
so
weird.
you're lucky. She was like, it
I
was
don't
terrible.
I don't know why. Maybe it's because of the fact that folks are doing a lot of weird things. Like I can tell you that I actually know a fan of the show who, so I actually have a lot of everything from the show I kept. So I'm looking at right now, I can see in my living room, I got a poster in Paris, and it's framed, and everyone signed it. All of the contestants signed it. The executive producers all signed it. And then I have another thing that's framed that's actually a flag with everybody's signatures. And then I also have like a fast forward, a roadblock. Everything is all in there, along with the little pouch they gave us that says Lenny and Karyn on it. So I was able to keep a lot of the stuff. And I actually have a box filled with every single original, saying that was in each roadblock or that each envelope. I have all those, right? I actually even have, there's one roadblock where we got a lighter. I think it was in Tunisia, and I actually still have the lighter. I actually, it was one day I actually it's been 20 years, and I flipped it and it actually still worked. I was like,
Wow.
I'm gonna set myself on fire. But I say all that to say, so we kept a lot of our stuff. My understanding from other contestants is that the show was trying to get all of the stuff back afterwards, right? They weren't allowed to keep it. But so I have a friend who's a fan of the show, who, what folks were doing is they were leaving stuff, like he was flying to Copenhagen to actually get an Amazing Race envelope out of the ceiling in a hotel. What? So a contestant who had stayed there while racing stuck it in the ceiling and then shared what room it was in that hotel. And he went to Copenhagen to get it, because I was actually going to fly with him. I had bought my ticket, but something came up at the last minute and I didn't go. So I think the reason why they may be sequestered, I don't know, is out of concern. There are fans that were actually trying to predict or follow where contestants were going. And it may be some belief that, they'll either provide them with, things from the show or somehow interfere with their ability to race. So.
Yeah, apparently you can't like do that anymore. Like you can't, like what you did in the roadblock, you're not allowed to do that anymore, because Rob and Amber, who were on Survivor and were on The Amazing Race, they basically were so famous that pretty much in like some legs when they were near the bottom, everybody took them where they need to go, and like they would ride with them. And so I don't really do that anymore. Well then, one of my last questions, was there any country or any challenge, not necessarily, I'm not sure if you watched the show, but on your season or any other season that you wish you could have gone to, or you wish you could have like maybe done a task score or whatever?
I still haven't, it's on my list of places to visit, is Thailand. I would have loved to have gone there. And I would have loved to have done the dog sledding in Alaska. That looked really fun on our leg.
Yeah, that looked really fun. There were a couple. I'm surprised they didn't take you to like an island location or whatever. That would have been cool, because you guys went to like Asia, but you never got to go to like Bora Bora or any of the cool island locations.
Yeah,
that would be really fun. But
yeah. But you asked me too if there was somebody who I would do the race with.
Yeah.
And I would love to do it with my brother. I really would.
I wonder how that would that I've always wondered what it would be like to be with like a sibling or a parent, because I feel like in terms of like my pick, I pick a friend just because we would argue less. And I feel like with a parent or a sibling, like you could argue more just because you.
Yeah, no, my brother and I get along really, really well. So I think and he's not like I felt like sometimes Lenny and I were just like arguing over unnecessary things, and my brother's not one to argue.
Well,
So
and unlike Lenny, I doubt he's like the zombie from Weekend from Bernie's, who you're pretty much just dragging through the race. Because I think at that time you were able to pick. You didn't have to do like 6 roadblocks and 6 roadblocks, and you pretty much did every single one of them except two. And I think you're like the only girl in history at that point with a guy-girl team that had done the majority of roadblocks, because I think in like one season, one guy did 13 and another girl only did one. Like it was like really uneven. So you basically were carrying the team the entire time. So at least you would have
well,
a better
I
chance.
came to play. I came to play. I mean, for me, it was, I wanted to get away from work. I wanted to do something that was different and competitive. So I really had a different reason, I think, for doing it than Lenny did. But you know, I also think too, though, that it potentially, if I would have done it with someone else, we wouldn't have gotten picked. I think clearly
Yeah.
production and casting recognized that there was something there in terms of, you know, how we were completely yin and yang, completely different, and how, and wanted to sort of see how this would play out in a high pressured situation. So,
And then my last question is just from your perspective, one of the things that I appreciated with The Amazing Race was the diversity in casting. Just talk about like me. Oh, two more questions. Do you have any good like off-air like stories that you did, maybe like resting at pit stops, or like do you have any funny moments that we can see that you wish made on air? And then
funny moments that I wish would have made on air. I really don't, I can't say, other than like, I was really surprised to your point that the ostrich egg thing, because that was just so disgusting. Like I remember like slime just like hanging down from my mouth was not funny. But okay, so I mean, for me, I actually found it just amusing myself. Um, I want to say we spent well over, I want to say it felt like 8 hours plus from the time we were released in Songway Village to when we actually found the place that we needed to find. But I remember when we started off, when we got released from the pit stop, you know, you're just like, oh, you're still in excitement mode and all happy. And so we're riding through these roads at night trying to figure out which way we're going, and we kept coming across like these, like I think it was a rabbit, and it was just like, and I was like worried that the driver would run the rabbit over. So I was like, you know, please, like, just be careful, like, you know, we'd see them constantly, right? And then I think at I want to say like hour 8 of still trying to find the clue, like a rabbit crossed in front of us, and I was just like, just hit it already, like, you know,
yeah,
like I didn't care anymore. I was just so angry and frustrated that I just like, I mean, my instinct to just be protective of animals was just out the window. I was done. And so I had to kind of stop and laugh to myself, because I realized just how different my mindset was then than it was hours earlier when, you know, I was like trying to protect these animals from getting hit. But just little things like that. I can't think of anything else specifically. I think a lot of stuff was captured. Like I said, one of my favorite things was the camera spitting on Lenny. Um, I mean, that was that tops. And I think other than that,
yeah.
pretty much it.
So just two more questions. I promise I'll let you go. Sorry, I keep
Okay,
forgetting.
it's all right.
So uh, talk about just, I think it was really funny at Songway Village, that party with you had with the Trimates, and you guys were just like drinking and dancing, and then Matt and Anna arrived, and you're just having a ball. Like, what was that like? Because that looked really fun. Did you
It
know like they arrived last or whatever, and you were just partying?
Yeah, it was. That's always the sad part, is that I'm trying to think. Was it? I remember one time they were in. Oh, I think Frank had still been drinking. Did they get him on camera when he was leaving? and he was going off. He was so, I think he was drunk at this point, and he was giving like a whole story on camera. I don't know if they captured that. I have to go back and watch it. But I remember everybody was like, "Oh my God, this is like so embarrassing. Like he won't stop talking." But we had fun. Like this is what you're supposed to do. Like just being immersed in the culture in the moment. We had drinks right when we got there, and then to be like, dancing and it was sad when, obviously they came in and we're sitting there watching them do their camera piece, where they're explaining sort of what happened. And so it went from this kind of really cheerful moment to just this somber moment of just like, them being eliminated. And then we were still able to talk to them afterwards because obviously there's no place for them to go. So they were still there with us. And then I think at some point they got escorted out after production cleared out and moved on to the next location.
That was one of my favorite episodes, especially Amy being like, "We're not in last," and screaming at Paul. I don't know why that was so funny. I'm like, that's me every sporting event. Like, I'm not in last. And then my last question is, obviously, Dave and Margaretta passed away and Emily passed away. Do you have any good stories about them?
That's really tough for me. I actually, so Margaretta, I spoke to a few, like I said, in the beginning, when all of this happened to us after the race, and, we are on TV shows and, everybody's doing their pieces when they're getting eliminated and stuff. And we all kept in touch very, very much for a while. And we're really close. And so I actually spoke to her on the phone, and I will always remember her saying to me, she was like, she told me she was always just a beautiful lady. She was just beautiful. But she said to me to do her a favor, and when I went out to a restaurant, to like have the dessert first. She was like, as opposed to, your regular meal. And she was just like, just do me that favor. And we had some, personal conversation around that. And so, yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow, losing her.
Yeah. She was, I just said, like, admired their team a lot just because they were older than everybody else, and the fact that they wanted to do it and stuff. I always appreciated Amazing Race with the diversity and casting, not only in age, but with you and Lenny and Frank Margarita and a bunch of different. They have like people from all different walks of life, and I wish that I hope that it's going to be more reflective throughout like the Amazing Race. Like I have a disability, so I would love to see more people on the Amazing Race with disabilities. So I just really appreciate.
Yeah, no, it's a great. Yeah, and her husband Dave is amazing as well. I mean, just he was a pilot. Like he's got such an amazing history there. Just great people, just generally, and even despite our perceptions initially and throughout the race of Bill, Team Guido, they're just a great group as well. Like to your point, it was a really diverse group of people. And at the end of the day, I have respect for them all. Nancy and Emily, amazing. Nancy was just like a mom. She could have been a mom to any of us. She was a sweetheart as well. And I haven't talked to, I don't know where Emily is. She hasn't, I have not seen her on Facebook, because where all of us that are on Facebook are all connected to each other. I'm not sure where she is. But even after the race, and after 9/11 occurred, and the show aired, we kept in touch through all of that. And then that New Year's Eve, we all met in Vegas. and hung out there together. So we've had events separate and apart from the race where we've just gotten together on our own, and communicating with folks now on social media. We're looking to have an event where we all get together again once this pandemic is over. So it's nice to see, people. I mean, we have this shared experience, right? That always pulls us together, and one that we'll never forget. And so I'm definitely proud to have been a part of it, and definitely enjoyed participating in it, notwithstanding, the Lenny Karyn situation. So
bad cabs.
Loved it.
That's the
what
one.
it was all about.
But last question. Were you ever like called for the Amazing Race? Did they ever call you back or something like that? Because as far as like characters, like you kind of, I feel like, I mean, the Guidos stood out for being villains. Frank with his like competitiveness, and then
I would do the Amazing Race with Frank. Frank and I are very good friends, believe it or not, to this day. And I would definitely do it with him. I think people thought, those were the two relationships that kind of were just at odds. It was like Frank and Margarita, at times you always heard about, how he was rough on her or pushing her. And then other times it was, they got along.
Yeah.
And then it was Lenny and I. And so I've heard conversations about how they should have flipped it, and Lenny and Margarita should have done the race together, and me and Frank, and, because I'm more aggressive like Frank is. And, so I would do it with Frank though.
I can only imagine like with Frank, like being in the first leg when he's like, God dang, we're not in first. And she's like, we're on the first flight. It doesn't matter. And he's like, I would be first at everything. And then you just screaming at him if he messed up. And then him being like, I'm the boss. You're being like, no, you're not the boss. Have you seen me? Like
he likes to control everything for sure.
Yeah, but I don't think he would let that fly. They should have made that team an all-stars instead of Eric and Danielle.
Yeah, I don't know how they go about picking teams, but I haven't been contacted by anyone in production about either doing it again or participating in any. I turned 50 this year, so the last day of this year, I'm like, but I guess if Dave and Margareta could do it at their age, I still could do it, right? So I might have to get in shape, but.
Well, I wonder what the oldest couple to ever do the race was. I think there was somebody in the Iceland version that was like 80-something.
Really?
He was like 85, and he was doing it with like his 30-something-year-old daughter.
Oh my gosh.
They weren't the first ones eliminated. They were like third.
Well, hey.
Yeah, but
it goes to show you anybody can do it, give it a try. So, and I like that it's like, to your point, it's very diverse. So hopefully they'll continue that.
That's all the questions I have. Thanks for being on my podcast, and I'll definitely let you know when this is posted. Thanks for answering all my questions and taking time out of your day. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome, Connor. My pleasure.
Definitely let you know when this is posted, and hopefully it can go viral or whatever you call it.
Okay, well, definitely let me know. I'll check it out for sure, and I'll post it on my page. I did send you a friend request.
Yeah, I got it. So
okay,
I'll let you know. But thank you so much. Oh, and if there's any, who do you think I should interview on my podcast? And if you know anyone, definitely hit me up.
I think you should interview Frank.
Well, I don't know how to contact him. I tried looking on Instagram.
I'll do it for you. I'll do it for you, and I'll put you in. I'll send you an instant message to the both of you.
Okay, if there's anyone that, because I'm just trying to get guests from all the types of shows.
Okay. All right. Yep. No, I'll get you. I think Frank would be a good one. You might want to try Brennan too. Brennan's always open to doing things. Yeah. I'll send you a link with some of the other ones that I would recommend.
Yeah.
Who I at least know would be open to talking to you.
Yeah. It took me a while to track you down.
Really?
Well, there was like multiple Karens. I'm like, wait, is this the right Karen? I'm like, oh, she works at like Like, she works at a law firm. She's from New Jersey. One time I messaged somebody and they were the wrong person. And
Oh,
I'm like, I'm not doing that again. So I'm glad I could do this podcast. Glad I could take you through memory lane and just thank
yeah. Now you've got me. I may have to sit down and watch it. I actually have I still have the DVDs.
yeah, on here in Roadblock is on the DVD, I think. So
Yeah, well, so I think I'm actually speaking to on the DVD. Kevin and Drew and Lenny and I were in the studio together.
oh yeah,
And they had us watch each episode and we did the voiceover. So I never even listened to that. So, but they sent me copies of the DVD so I could.
yeah. But thank you so much. And
You're very welcome.
posted.